the dialogue around number one, what our expectations are of our partners is a really great starting point because of the fact that it helps us understand where we may be overextending an expectation that ultimately is coming back to hurt us and really be unfair to us.
But having expectations that your partner needs to be like your everything and they should know every single thing about you and they should just know is not fair and it's not adaptive at all. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
And it's Emilia.
Welcome to another episode of Evolve Ventures, where we're helping growth-minded humans evolve by breaking one limiting belief at a time. We hope you enjoyed the last episode, 279, Motivation Monday. Growth is painful, but here's why it's worth it. For today, 280, How to Have Better Fights. Emilia wanted to throw me out the window when she saw the title of this episode and was like, B, we need to change it. We got to change the title. I can't do this. I can't advocate for this. And that's honestly exactly why I titled this episode the way that I did, because it is a little triggering, but it's the reality of what you and I hear every single day as coaches and clinicians, that people are fighting a lot with the people in their life and with their partners, and they want to learn how to do it better. So what we're going to be diving into today, it's not how to have better fights. It's what are the things that you need to do so that you're not having fights? What are the boundaries? What is the communication? What are all of these really fundamental skills that you need to have so that you're not having fights, quote unquote, but that you're actually having the maybe passionate discussions or conversations or whatever the case may be to actually have your relationships be successful? Or maybe to realize that it's not the right relationship for you and that you need to exit it. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. And this is going to be a little different, kind of, than the way that we typically do things. I don't claim to be a relationship expert at all. I'm still, like, from a clinical perspective, I'm still learning a lot of this stuff. But Emilia has spent the last 30 years
Forever.
since her inception, really really studying and mastering this. I really don't know anybody who's better than Emilia at this. So I'm going to ask her questions and I'm going to pick her brain, and with the intention of, these are the types of questions that I know a lot of us are probably asking and thinking. So, you ready? You buckled
I'm
in?
so excited. I'm buckled in. And I also want to say thank you, number one, for that, because there's definitely a part of me that's so insecure right now. I was like, well, I'm not an expert, and like just discounts all of the 30 years of like intentional study and, you know, failures and everything like that and helping people. So I'll share that. But that is one of the key components to exceptional relationships, and that's why I start by saying that, because being your authentic self is what's going to help you have quote unquote better fights. And why I got so gassed up, like you said, on this episode is because I wish there was a world that we could live in without fighting, you know, because I understand it from a neurochemistry standpoint and how that impacts our longevity, our life, like our lifestyles, right? And I've seen the compound effect of people who have grown up in a household of parents of people that they love fighting, you know, and I know the impact of that. So if I could remove that from the world, I certainly would. However, one of the other keys to exceptional and extraordinary relationships that I'll give, and I'm sure our conversations will pull up the other four, is actually productive conflict. And contrary to popular belief, conflict is actually incredibly important and vital for exceptional relationships, which is the opposite of what this episode pretty much is sharing, which is having better fight. You wouldn't think that having healthy and productive conflict is the antidote to that, but we'll get in, and I'll give a little bit more context to that later on.
Wait, no, can we start there? Why? I can fully like thinking about it. I'm like that actually makes a ton of sense, but can you dive
Mhm.
into why that is for everybody listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's pretty much six components of having exceptional relationships. When you actually look at like the literature about what takes a relationship from just the surface level, right? And what helps it kind of progress down the spectrum to over on the completely opposite end of extraordinary, exceptional, what people look to Alan and myself for essentially, and what we help other people with. And those
Mhm.
six components, one of them is productive conflict. And one of the reasons behind that is because when we can actually speak our truth and that butts up someone else's truth, i.e., productive conflict, we start to understand where we as human beings, so like where I end and where Alan begins. And without productive conflict, we actually don't know who we're in relationship with. And productive conflict is essentially the byproduct of expressing who you actually are, where you stand, what your beliefs are, what your values are, what your aspirations are. And oftentimes we find conflict right in the fringes of where one person's, like Alan, for example, where his values, aspirations, and beliefs are, and where the other person's values, aspirations, and beliefs are. And in that interpiece, in that center point, is where conflict often resides. But without understanding who we are, the conflict ends up actually spinning out of control and not productive, is not healthy. That's where we start bashing people. That's where we start really hurting one another with our words. So the why underneath that really resides in that.
So conflict is kind of that anchoring point to allow you to really grow together
Hmm.
because that conflict requires you to see the other person for who they are and where they are, and then see where you are, and then meet each other there. And then having to have the like the productive communication skills and healthy boundaries and whatever to let the
Hmm.
relationship continue. Is that true? Is that what I heard you say?
Absolutely. And that actually leads to another one of the six elements to extraordinary relationships, which is commitment to growth. So when you do understand where those boundaries are, when you do understand what that person is in contrast to who you are, you actually can commit to growth and have what we refer to as a fixed mindset, and suspend your own reality of what you might believe, what you might think, all that stuff. And you can suspend that reality and say, based on my understanding of the difference between who I'm in relationship with, I'm committed to growing, to learning this person, to learning about this person so that our relationship can grow. And so that shifts from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset. And that is an extraordinary relationship, always has that.
Okay. So I'm thinking of, I'm going to kind of tie these together. So the
Hmm.
ability to have a growth mindset and to have healthy conflict kind of allows you to, like, it's very similar to setting a goal. So if you're
Hmm.
setting a goal, let's say to lose 10 pounds, you need that kind of discord between where you are versus the end result of that goal, which is that like quote unquote conflict because you're seeing the difference. And then the growth
Hmm.
mindset allows you to get to the point where it's like, I believe I can get there.
And it'll be worth it by having this uncomfortable conversation. Whereas non productive conflict is someone likely who has a fixed mindset and doesn't have a commitment to growth and is trying to just be heard, or it doesn't feel respected. Like all of these things, doesn't feel like their partner has been honest, maybe isn't honest with themselves. Maybe the trust of the relationship has started to break down. That's where some of those components really start to come into play in opposition to what we're talking about.
Okay. Let's get started with, or let's continue with a very loaded question, but I'm going to start us off here.
Let's get it.
Why do people fight? So, like, why does it you're smirking. Why
It's
is
good.
it so kind of like a secondary question off of that.
Mhm.
Why is it a fight and why isn't it maybe like healthy communication or healthy conflict or whatever? So, number 1, why do people fight? Let's start there.
Let's start there. So, I'm going to take it from the very, like, I have envisioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the very bottom. So, what we likely wouldn't jump to in terms of if I were to ask all of our listeners to ask the same question to themselves, we would all come up with different answers, right? With that being said, the number one reason why we fight is because of the fact that many of us are living in survival mode. When you just look strictly at the
Ooh.
statistics of how few people actually get their basic needs met, and I'm strictly speaking on this case, sleep alone. I believe it's like 76% of human beings are sleep deprived. And why that even matters and how that connects to conflict and fighting is because when you're sleep deprived, which a lot of people are, your central nervous system isn't really able to navigate the waters, let's say, that you're going to trek into when it comes to relationships. And because people are different, when you go in sleep deprived and then all of a sudden you start to disagree on something, how you handle and how you navigate that, you already have essentially, it's like picture like a boat drifting in the ocean trying to get to the other destination without any chart, without a map, without an understanding of where you want to go, without the ability to actually capture the wind to get you there. That's how our brain and our central nervous system is essentially operating. So we don't have the ability to emotionally regulate when we might feel number 2, which is why people fight. We often feel unheard in our relationships. We don't feel seen and we don't feel loved. So that those 3 combinations, think of it like a stack on top of already our basic needs not being met. If we're not able to emotionally regulate the treacherous waters of what relationships are, let's just be real. And then on top of that, we don't feel like we are seen, heard, and loved or valued. That's just a garden of being ready and armored up and, guns ablazing for fights. And that's where I'll start with that question.
So, we're not taking care of ourselves. Like
Mhm.
I mean, most people are significantly neglecting themselves, whether it comes to sleep or nutrition or
Nutrition,
exercise or like even just in any way
hydration.
giving their body
Mhm.
really what it needs to function the best that it can. Then you add on top of that not feeling seen, not feeling valued, not feeling heard, not feeling loved. I think the third
Mhm.
part of that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is add those together, then you're also modeling what your experience was growing up.
Exactly.
So when you're sleep
Exactly.
deprived and when you're not taken care of by yourself, you're going to be more likely to revert back to those old or continue those old patterns of behavior, of communication, of thinking, of feeling, so on and so forth. So it's really just
Oh, yeah.
like a negative snowball effect.
Yeah, it starts to really spiral, and that's one of the reasons why when I first get clients, I really I help them understand kind of where they're at in their own self-care practices. That's why, Evolve, I believe, is so special because it is, holistic mental health and how mental health overlaps with relationships. And I'm always asking, like, how much sleep you get? I want the sleep data because that's pretty much the foundation of everything else. And I know that very, very intimately because of the fact that I've had my own struggles in that arena. But here's another thing that I think is interesting when it comes to fights and social dynamics. You just added that third layer on, which is oftentimes because we're in survival mode, we often are just, our brain is picking up on anything that is modeled for us. So, like our parents, how they navigated conflict or fighting, like we just adapted. It's like literally, let's like print and stamp. That's what our experiences often are. And if we're sleep deprived, let's just say hypothetically, and we're not really taking care of ourselves, we already have that coding, if you will, that stamped, imprinted in us. What are the chances if we don't have enough sleep considering that social dynamics actually require a different part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the really challenging thinking processes that are involved. If our brains are just trying to figure out how to survive and get through the day, it is unlikely that we are going to instead go out and create or break the cycle and how we navigate conflicts and fighting, right? It's very unlikely, and there's a very statistically low probability because of the fact that we don't necessarily have the resources, to be quite frankly. When we just speak about it from a body budget, we've talked about that in past episodes. If you don't have the body budget for it, let's say any day that you've been sleep deprived, what are the chances that you fought with your partner that day? Any day that you have struggled to actually take care of yourself, what's the probability that you are a little bit more snippy with your partner, and maybe not in a way that you are proud of? What are the odds that when you were sleep deprived and you were struggling at work, you actually were kind to your coworker, your family, your friends? Probability is low because of the fact that our bodies operate within a specific energy budget.
So, the steps required in having better fights, then, number one, which we're not going to talk about in this episode, we've done a ton of episodes about this, but are going
Mhm.
to be taking care of your needs physically. Just
Yep.
starting there. From a baseline standpoint, you're going to need to make sure that your health and your well being are being prioritized because they are the foundation. Okay, so that's table scraps. We're just going to leave that there. Two and three are kind of interwoven then, because if we're replicating the dynamics from our relationships growing up and from our family and whatnot, that's impacting number two, which is the ability to be see, heard, and understood. Meaning, if you're not feeling those, how do you approach it? How are you
Yeah.
approaching it with your partner? So let's dive in there.
Mhm.
If someone is in a relationship right now, and I've definitely been here too, where you're not feeling seen, you're not feeling
Mhm.
heard, you're not feeling understood, you're not feeling loved. We talked about this a couple of episodes ago with that
Mhm.
client of mine who was really struggling to get her partner on the same page as her, regardless of how many times she said it and trying alternative ways to say it.
Yeah.
Where do people start? Like, how do
Mhm.
you start to actually be seen and heard and understood by your partner? Because you can't just force somebody to love you. You can't force somebody to treat you the way that you want and need to be treated. So, like, how do you even start that?
Mm. It's such a good question, and it's so situational. But what I would say is a theme and a trend that I've really seen to be successful in this arena is starting with our own expectations of our relationship and of our partner, let's say in this instance. So, like, for example, if your client were to ask herself, what can my partner realistically what can they handle in terms of being like seeing me, hearing me, and valuing me, right? That one question can open up a whole different plethora of answers. And when we look at it from the standpoint of expectations, we can maybe start to take into account, well, if my partner's getting on average 6 hours of sleep and they're in their own survival mode, is it fair for me to have an expectation to be heard in this relationship? If I know what it's like to get 6 hours of sleep and not be on the struggle bus, and I'm struggling to actually see, hear, and value other people to a 10 out of 10 degree, is it really fair for me to project an expectation that is a high level of that when I'm recognizing that my partner is actually in a crap ton of survival mode? And they are kind of just reverting back to their own conditioning. So I think that the dialogue around number one, what our expectations are of our partners, is a really great starting point because of the fact that it helps us understand where we may be overextending an expectation that ultimately is coming back to hurt us and really be unfair to us. So, for example, go ahead, you have something.
I was just going to say, I might be wrong. I don't think I am, though. I think we need to be mindful of that advice, though, because a lot of our listeners and I know this was the case for me, are probably already accepting so much less than they
Mm,
deserve and are already justifying the behavior of their partner. So I think the advice, like, oh, well, be even more empathetic when you're already kind of people pleasing and doing a lot of these behaviors,
mm.
might not be the best advice. So
I'm glad you
I
said
feel like,
that, B, because what I was just saying in terms of adjusting expectations, it actually doesn't translate to being more empathetic, and it doesn't it doesn't translate to justifying their behaviors. It's more so from a standpoint of understanding like what is actually capable of being given in this relationship, so that you are making sure, which was number two, making sure that you're effectively addressing your own boundaries in this situation. So, like, let's say, for example, your client is not actually capable and you reassess your expectations of your partner. And let's say, for example, you are a people pleaser and you're getting way less than you quote unquote have earned. We're not talking about deserving right now. Have earned that you've put in that work. Okay. When you level set your expectations, it does not mean that you're going to be okay with your partner not seeing you, not hearing you, not respecting you. Okay. And I want to make sure that that's clear. So I'm super grateful that you said that, because you do have a lot of people that are listening to our podcast who likely are people pleasers and tolerating a lot of disrespect in their relationship, the fundamentals of relationship, because of this
yeah,
perpetuating cycle that's happening. Right. So when I say expectations, I put it with that caveat of it's not to have that translate to more empathy. It's not to have that translate to being okay and justifying the behaviors of a relationship that does not fulfill and meet your needs, nor hears, sees you, and respects you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Derek Smith, and I'm the department head of the Evolve Venture Society page. I just wanted to come on here and talk about my time at Evolve and being a team member. It's been nothing short of phenomenal, and I don't say that as somebody just trying to hype up the team or the business or anything like that. No, it's genuine, and like genuinely, I've never been a part of such a group, had people that were so invested in me, being able to keep me accountable and like pushing and really just supporting me for my own growth. And the amount of things that I've been able to help and influence, manage in myself, learn about, and just being a part of this community, all under the guidance of Bianca and Emilia, for me, that's just been phenomenal. So my time here has just been very, very blessed. So thank you, Emilia. Thank you, Bianca. You guys rock.
so what you're saying is level setting your expectations, meaning what your like expectations of a relationship are, or what your expectations of getting from another person. So like, are you saying, how do I want to ask this? Are you saying like, because I feel like a lot of people are probably asking the same question too, so I'm trying to think of like how to best ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying like level set what your beliefs around relationships are? So like my partner is supposed to be ultra loving all the time and giving all the time, and if someone loves me then they should do this. So like the rules, assumptions, and beliefs around your relationships.
That's a great way to start. And I'll share an example. So I have a client right now who is actually right now they're having, fights with their partner. They've been with their partner for a little over a year now. And what we just did, we took her through this approach, pretty much what we're talking about here, with understanding what are her expectations. So essentially an expectation audit is what we did. And she's someone who is highly she feels emotional, and she's super empathetic in terms of like she's just a hardcore empath, and I know a lot of our listeners are. And with that being said, a lot of her relationships never really actually were capable of giving her the level of talking space, if you will,
Mm.
to where she would feel seen, heard, and valued. And for her to have the level of talking space where your partner just holds space, that directly translates to her feeling loved. And so her relationships that she deeply craves and seeks is being able to obtain and hold that safe space to just express what happened in the day, what she went through, all that jazz, right? A basic need for her in the relationship. And she has an expectation after this audit that we kind of came up, the assumptions, the rules, etc., that her partner is and is capable of holding the emotional space for her to feel heard, seen, valued, and loved. And the truth is, when we actually peeled back the layer of understanding what is he going through, what is he realistically capable of giving, what we found is that he's not actually capable right now of working through those moments, which ultimately end up in fights because her expectation is that he should have the capacity to hold safe space for me. And
Okay.
that should is where the fights then ensue. And so that level setting of an expectation, hopefully that's a great example that helped connect the dots. She realized that it's not that she should tolerate the fact that that's what her needs are in the relationship and it's not currently being met. However, it is helpful for her to understand that so that she's not going into every single interaction thinking that she can get her needs met in the relationship, but ultimately gets let down and then gets fought and then ensues all the other stuff, which I know a lot of our listeners struggle with.
So, level setting your expectations is a two-part experience. Number one, it's understanding what are your beliefs and understandings and needs when it comes to a relationship. And then number two, is your partner in a place where they are capable right now or ever of being able to give you that and meet that? And if
Right.
not, are they able to get better at it?
hmm And that's one of the key things too that we uncovered that I uncover a lot with clients is that they have these, and we all do, expectations of what relationships are, beliefs around what relationships are. Even just, we talked about it in a past episode. Do you believe that relationships are 50-50? Or do you hold the belief that relationships are actually 100-100, meaning both of you are responsible for the outcome and inputs into your relationship? Oftentimes, when we surveyed 100 people, it's 50-50. That's the belief. And so that one belief translates to a lot of rules, a lot of unconscious and unspoken expectations that partner one has of partner two in the relationship. So when we pull back that layer with clients, we start to understand, oh, I have never talked about what my expectations are in the relationship. And the
Yeah.
outcome of when my partner doesn't actually show up in the way in which I want him or her to do so or they to do so, that's when I get flustered, especially if I didn't get great sleep, right? That's when I start to be upset and all of those emotions, then we start to fight.
So your expectations and needs and rules and beliefs, you have to know them with clarity before you can then ask it of another person because most of them are unconscious and we don't even know we're having them. So step number one, just to reiterate, is to level set your expectations. And what that's going to look like is number one, identifying what your specific rules and beliefs and needs are. And then part two, how have you been kind of expecting that of your partner? So, really assessing, is your partner capable right now of meeting those expectations?
Mhm.
And have you communicated those expectations? So, kind of like in the midst of that. So, what
Just
is
gonna say.
step two after that?
Step two, after that, is when you do get that clarity, is really communicating that to your partner. Honestly, because, and I'm glad that you said that because at the end of the day, if we're just, and this is where I think it's almost comical, a lot of people expect us to, right? You've always heard of like the adage of I'm just expecting, for my partner to read my mind. I'm just expecting that. Like we don't realize how much that is actually in our relationships. And the truth is no one can read your mind. And although you want that to be true, it doesn't matter if you've been together for 40 years, it is not a safe assumption to think that your partner knows what you're thinking.
Nobody would ever admit that they're expecting that, but what you probably have said is, well, they should know. They should know I don't like this. They should know I like that. They should know this or that. That's mind reading. You're expecting your partner to mind read when you've been, it doesn't matter to you what you said. It doesn't matter how long you've been with somebody. I think another expectation that needs to be level set is your partner should not be your everything. You should not be, they should not be whatever the one sole thing on their mind, nor on yours. So, having expectations that your partner, and this ties into number one, but having expectations that your partner needs to be like your everything and they should know every single thing about you and they should just know is not fair and it's not adaptive at all. So, the ability to have a growth mindset in a relationship saying, I'm going to constantly try to learn you and you're going to learn me. And we're going to communicate because we are ever evolving every single day is a huge critical component of this, and where that need to be able to effectively communicate all of these things to your partner and them communicating this to you is really going to come into play.
It's so, so important. I cannot emphasize this point enough. And that's actually where the expectations, the rules, the beliefs, the assumptions that we have in our relationships, that's often where this starts to connect into what we've done a lot of podcasts on around what is your attachment style. Because let's say, for example, there is an unconscious expectation that your partner should be the only place to where you can vent about your day, right? There's not other ways that you have other people that you have to vent about your day. Like that's just a normal human experience. That's actually what we call coping with the events of your day. And there's other ways to cope. Now, you might be someone like I have another client who is such a person who copes really adaptively with verbal processing, and it's a lot of pressure on her friend group, her peers that she can emotionally vent to. One of the little tools and tips that I gave to her that I announced in another podcast was making sure that you are asking for that permission for the people that you are maybe emotionally venting or dumping on. Because not all of us have the ability to really just hold space because we are going through our own stuff, right? So that's one of the things, that not feeling guilty or not feeling like a burden when you do express whatever it is you have to your partner. But if you are finding yourself that the expectations actually summate to, I'm expecting my partner to be my one all be all everything, that's where you start to recognize you're likely you're in an insecure attachment style, which is either anxious, avoidant, more likely anxious, but anxious or disorganized. And here's that thing, the step number 3 really comes down to have better fights. It's to recognize that you're in all of what we talked about and you're in the journey. Hopefully, if you're committed to growth, which is one of the cornerstone foundations to exceptional relationships, you can actually start to shift into the journey, into the process of actually navigating towards what looks like to be a healthy and secure adaptive relationship. And that's where, whether it be with your partner, whether it be with other people, just in general, if you tend to have all of these, well, this partner should know, this friend should know, they should, XYZ, insert all of your assumptions and beliefs. That's where you go from where you're at to really shifting into and out of the fighting that you're having into even examining conflict to eventually a really productive component of you being you and being in relationships because of that, and seeing the benefit of that, and not necessarily going to pick a fight with every single thing, but rather recognizing where conflict is extremely healthy for the relationship to build and to grow, as you kind of learn yourself. So I'll kind of end with that.
I think an important thing to add here is that the truth of the matter is not all relationships are meant to last. Not all relationships should continue. And so if you're on this journey of trying to have better fights and trying to be a better partner and to have a really incredible relationship, and you're seeing that your partner is just like you're putting in a ton of work and your partner is either not meeting you or they're not putting in the work or they're actively working against you, in this, it might be time to reevaluate whether this is the right relationship for you or not. And that is
Facts.
really scary. Just because you're doing the work, it doesn't mean your partner's going to. And I wish that everybody would do the work to make themselves a better person and to heal their history and to want to grow, but it's not the case. And if you are constantly fighting and you're putting in the work and you're trying and your partner is just not changing and they are not meeting you, it might be time to reevaluate the relationship, because you can have good fights. And I know Emilia doesn't like that word, but this is what we all know it as. So you can have good fights. You can have fights that lead to change, into productive, you know, progress in your relationship. But if your fights are kind of circling around the same things over and over again and nothing is changing and they start becoming really maladaptive, it might be for a reason. It might be because the relationship is not supposed to continue. So, just something to evaluate. Um, yeah. So, the three steps, just to finalize and to wrap up. Number one, level setting expectations. And like we said, there's two parts to that. So, number one, understanding your own needs, expectations, beliefs, and values. And then number two, identifying whether your partner has met you there thus far and or is capable of it. Number two, really communicating your needs and learning to really hear the needs of your partner. And then number three, I don't remember what you said, so please say succinctly what you said, because I just
N-
slipped my mind.
Number three is the journey from whatever your attachment style is, which is likely if you're fighting a lot, it's usually in the realm of insecure, and move towards that journey of secure attachment. And likely with that step number three, again, that's a process. So you'll find what are the things that are most contributing to the reason was why maybe you are regressing when you're putting in the work back to maybe an anxious attachment style. B, you had talked very vulnerably and openly about what that was like for you in a relationship where you were on your own accord putting in the work to try to work towards this more secure attachment, but yet there was a partner that you had where you found yourself in hindsight regressing back to the anxious attachment style, right? And that relationships can do that. And that's why I'm super grateful that you said that last sentiment there, because I can remember as early as probably fourth grade when I had one of my best friends. A lot of people would lean on me for relationship advice back then, and guidance. And she had said, can you just like help me to make him like me? And I'm like, that's just not
Oh,
how it works, and it's just not
oh,
how it works. And I'm
no.
saying that because as we grow and become adults, there's very much that same sentiment in our insecure attachment style, right? We just want people to like us. We just want to be loved. We just want to be heard, seen, valued, appreciated, all that jazz. But here's the thing, there's work involved with that. And relationships do require work. And if you have a growth mindset, you will actually be extraordinarily grateful that that work is there, because it is a ladder and you have to climb and you have to put in that work. But it will be so well worth it, because what might not have served you back then and what relationship just might not have been right for you because of all these things that we talked about, you will build the skill that then you can take what we call the transferable skills of what you've learned and then help to go and apply them into the next try, just like some of my clients are doing right now as they're dating and
Absolutely.
on their pursuit to find their partner in a secure attachment style.
I want to clarify something that you said really quick just before we wrap up.
Mhm.
An insecure attachment is either disorganized, avoidant, or anxious. I think you kind of slipped and said only anxious. So I just want to make sure that I say this. It's not only the anxiously attached that's like getting into these fights.
Definitely
It's
not.
all three.
Definitely.
It's all
Yep.
three. Whether you're avoidant, disorganized, or anxious, the fights are just going to look a little bit different.
Yeah.
But like, so the usually avoidantly attached, they're fighting because they need more space. Usually the anxious, it's because they want less space. And then the
Mhm.
disorganized is like
Both.
ambivalent and a mix between the two.
Yeah.
So you're if you're an insecure attachment, it's one of those three, and that is likely where a lot of the fights are coming from. It's not because of your attachment, but the way the fights are happening are
Definitely.
partly a result of your attachment. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that so everyone is not
Thank
like,
you.
"Oh, the anxious sucks," because we already think
No, not at all.
a lot of us already think that anyways. So
We love
I
you.
just wanted to make sure
We
that I
love you.
clarified that.
We love you. Thank you for
What
that.
is your episode? No problem. What is your episode suggestion?
So my episode suggestion for everyone jumping from this one is definitely 218. Are you in control, or is your past? Again, we talked about this at the very beginning. One of the reasons why we do fight is because just from a physiological standpoint, we do not have a body budget to really emotionally regulate and go through the tough social dynamics that it takes to just be a human in a relationship. But number two is really that imprinting, what was modeled, what was shown to you and imprinted into your conditioning as you grew up. So oftentimes that sense of past comes with you into relationships. So that's for me. What about you?
All right. 251, how to set boundaries. If learning more about relationships and all of these fun things, everything that we talked about today, this episode was really, it covered a lot of topics.
It
And
did.
a lot of these topics are actually exactly what we talk about in the Evolve Ventures group coaching program, which is going to be launching again for round two very, very soon. We don't have a specific start date yet, but it's going to be launching within the next couple of months. So if you're interested in signing up, our first round was insanely successful. Every single person who joined that said that that group changed their life, and it was
Mm.
a lot less intimidating than they thought it was going to be when they originally signed up. So if you want more information on that, or yeah, if you want more information on that, please reach out to us, and we're going to be starting to drop some of the promo and specific like dates very soon. So super excited to have you as a part of the group number 2, and we will see you all next time. Bye everybody.
Bye everyone.